The Democrat plan, make America miserable again. Theodore Roosevelt statue is coming down here in New York City. Cancel Yale gains a lot of steam online. Plus, a noose found in NASCAR driver's garage stall. The truth about the Trump rally over the weekend. And NPR says cars are now right-wing weapons. Coming up. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. An honor and a privilege, as always, to get a chance to speak to you all across the country, all across the nation, and in some cases all around the world. What's up, Team Buck Global? So we are in a fight that we should have been expecting all along. In fact, I don't find this even the least bit surprising, the ferocity, the nastiness. It's just the tactics and the timing that perhaps has caught some of us off guard. What really are the Democrats trying to accomplish right now? And let's understand, this is a Democrat movement. This is not something that we should just generally refer to as protesters. We should not allow this to be somehow taken off the ledger of American politics that would go under the Democrat side. What's happening right now is a Democrat cultural and political revolution. And that's why they're adopting the very tactics of revolutionaries past. In fact, much of the same rhetoric. And some of this has been a repetition of what we've seen. I've been mentioning this to you for weeks now. The Occupy Wall Street movement, the first Black Lives Matter movement, the Antifa in the early months of the Trump presidency. They've recycled a lot of what we've seen before, but the additional reasons for their power and their rise right now are we are going through a pandemic that has empowered government beyond what would have been our wildest dreams even 6 months ago. Right? Nobody could have thought, or perhaps we should have, but nobody did think that we would go through so much tyranny with barely a peep from the general public, it seems, about what's happening, about the seizure of rights, the virtual suspension of the Constitution. People don't seem very much bothered by this at all, but there was a tremendous amount of rage that was bottled up over time. Anger and frustration and 40 million plus lost jobs and the lack of human contact and the misery and the lies from the government, the transparent and obvious lies that we have been forced to stomach. And then you add all of that to a period of political lunacy from the left, the anti-Trump delusion, the anti-Trump derangement syndrome that's out there. You put these things together and you have a very combustible mix, and we are dealing with the explosion right now. It's best that we understand that. It's best that we are clear about how we got to this point. And we see that we are up against a very tenacious and a very challenging enemy here. If Donald Trump has one tagline that is most associated with him, it is, of course, the initial campaign slogan of 2016, Make America Great Again, which has now transitioned into Keep America Great. But I think a lot of us still have a much greater affinity for the original one. Make America Great Again. That's where the president has positioned himself right now. He told me in the Oval Office but a few weeks ago about his plan to transition us to greatness, that we were going to get back the America that we had become used to for 3 years with Donald Trump as president. But now we see the Democrats have taken up the opposite side of that bargain, and they have no shame about it. The Democrats have decided that the inducement of misery, that widespread dissatisfaction, despair, rage, division on cultural, class, race, ethnic lines, whatever they can do to exacerbate any sore points in the American polity, whatever they can do to make us hate each other, mad at each other, and just feel like things are going poorly. That's what they're going to do. None of the proposals that Democrats are talking about right now, you'll notice that none of the things that are of interest to rational, reasonable people as ways to really bring about a better country, that's not what they're focused on. The Democrats don't care about that. They're not trying to fix all of these problems. They're proposing things that are even more divisive. They want further lockdowns because of COVID. They want more statue toppling. They want less police, more defund police, and a greater leeway for criminals on the streets to terrorize law-abiding people of all races, backgrounds, creeds, and colors. That's the position of the Democrat Party right now, because they understand that they can't inspire. There's nothing inspirational about their Marxism, their leftism, their revolutionary rhetoric, which is so empty when you push on it a bit. What do they really want? Who are we going to replace with all these statues? Are we just going to have Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama and Bill Clinton statues? Well, Bill Clinton might be a bit too Me Too'd. But who's going to be acceptable to celebrate in the public sphere when they're done? We'll talk more today about who the latest cancellation figures are, who they're going after, the explosion of this movement and the expansion of the targets just keeps going with every day. But remember this, the Democrats do not present you with ideas to make you happier and freer. They present you, if you are a Trump supporter, if you are a moderate, if you are not a part of the left-wing base of the Democrat Party, they present you with a poorer, less free, less happy, less safe America. And they want that right now. They're actively rooting for failure. I'm not shy about this. I'm going to say it. They want this country to suffer because in their minds, that's the only way that they can force us to expunge the sin of the Trump presidency. And that is a sin for which they will not give us forgiveness. There will be penance required of us. They will demand that we suffer because we and they don't care that there are people who are going to suffer that didn't vote for Trump. Collective guilt, collective suffering. This is the order of the day for the Democrat Party. This is what they believe in. They want all of us to go through this. They want all of us to be caught up in this. And yes, there are people who are chanting for it. Yes, there are people that believe the police are the enemy and that bringing back what is really just critical race theory stretching from the 1960s and 1970s, that race is the single defining characteristic of everything in our society. More so than anything else, race influences our ideas, our politics, our culture. And that the only way to confront this is to accept that anyone who is white in America has an original sin, again, one for which they must be punished. It's not even enough to bend the knee. You have to suffer. And our communities are going to suffer. Our cities are on the decline. The American metropolis is something that will be looked upon fondly in the future as a period of history, a period of time when we could all live together with declining crime rates, with increases in household wealth, with overall prosperity, better, cleaner streets, better, cleaner services. You know, this was what we were seeing for the last 20 years. Not in some Democrat cities, but there were some major exceptions to it. Things were going pretty well. We'll look back on that and realize that this was all taken from us, and it was taken by choice. And the Democrats are willing to burn down the village in order to save it. And that's what they're doing right now. If they can't have control of America, no one can. And if they can't find a way to get control by promising better ideas and a better future, they'll just make this one so miserable that people will be desperate to vote for an empty suit and a nothing as a leader like Joe Biden. It doesn't matter. Anything but what we have right now. Bring the country to its knees and then make it vote for someone other than the person who they will claim is responsible for all of this misery. Working from home is driving up the worst type of cybercrime, home title theft. We're doing it all from home these days. Working, banking, video conferences, meal deliveries, and shopping. Cybercriminals are targeting our homes. Actually, they want the money they can get by taking out loans against your home. The crime is home title theft, and the FBI is warning homeowners about it all over the place. Home Title Lock is how you protect your home from cyber thieves. Your home's legal title is online where they can find it and forge your signature stating you sold your home to them. Then they'll take out loans on your home and leave you in debt. Banks, insurance, and basic identity theft services don't protect you. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title. Protect your home now. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. and use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection to help you through this crisis. That's code BUCK at HomeTitleLock.com. Again, code BUCK at HomeTitleLock.com. So who's the latest in the list of cancellations? Oh my, an expanding list with one very, very big name that the left is clearly going to celebrate as an enormous victory for their side. You have, let me see here. Who are the latest to get canceled? Woodrow Wilson. Monmouth University is going to rename a building that has been called the Woodrow Wilson Center or something like that. In France, Voltaire, perhaps the greatest and most beloved French language writer, at least globally speaking, he's getting canceled. Saint Junipero Serra, or I guess it's Junipero Serra, canceled. Albert Pike, canceled. Ulysses S. Grant, canceled. And oh yes, that's right, the one that's getting a lot of attention right now, a statue of Theodore Roosevelt out in front of the New York Museum of Natural History. That also has got to go. That decision's already been made. This is not even the mob pulling it down. You see, the mob concert with the establishment institutional levels doing the own. We've seen political movements in the past adopt a very similar position. This is what you should be expecting. The Democrat Party is just the entity for the political concessions to come through, right? The Democrat Party is there ready to seize power. But the vanguard of the far left, the shock troops, they're doing all of these things knowing that they're trying to get the Democratic Party more. That's why fundamentally this is an anti-Trump movement. This is all about power. This is not about what's right. It's not about all of a sudden a moral awakening in the country. Think of this a bit like the IRA in Ireland and Sinn Féin. And this is true of many places. You could pick any number of political parties that also have a militant wing. I've been saying for years that Antifa is just the militant wing of the Democratic Party. And they understand that they can go with force and destruction up to a certain extent. You know, if Antifa was blowing up town squares and killing a lot of people, that would be harmful to the movement. Do I think that that's beyond the immorality and insanity of Antifa? No, but it's counterproductive to their aims. So what do? They use force that goes up to street violence, right? Punching people, throwing bricks, attacking cops, destroying stores. But they're still effectively the militant arm of the Democratic Party. So you have these militants that make these extreme demands and do all of these violent and illegal and destabilizing things. But behind all of it's the Democratic Party there to just sort of pick up whatever they can to use this as leverage. Hey, you know, sorry, America. Nice Constitution you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it from our buddies in Antifa, right? Be a shame if something happened, Black Lives Matter might have to come cancel you. But you could just vote Democrat. You could just give us a little more in the Democrat Party, and maybe then BLM will stop trying to cancel you, stop trying to ruin your life. I wouldn't anticipate that this is ever going to get better unless we stand up to it, because it's working. And that's what we all have to understand. They are winning right now. And, you know, people are entitled to their opinions from within the right, of course. I can't sit here and advocate for free speech and the freedom to dissent and all this. But if I have one more person tell me, you know, with an email or a message, don't worry, Trump has been expecting all of this. Guys, no, he hasn't. He is not winning right now. We are not tired of winning. We are not winning right now. I think we will be soon if we wake up.
Well, that statue, that specific statue, you're right. It does portray a subjugation of Native Americans and African Americans, and it's not an appropriate statue. What we need to do is have a conversation as a country. We need to have a conversation and go through a process where we have to come to terms with some of our monuments, our statues, the names of our streets, the names of our bases, and what's appropriate for our values.
Blather. Abject, moronic blather from a New York City councilman there on the Teddy Roosevelt statue coming down. It's been there since 1940, and Roosevelt's family was instrumental in the founding of the New York Museum of Natural History. I used to go there as a kid. In fact, I remember going to birthday parties that were held there. The coolest thing was they had a giant blue whale that was the actual size of a blue whale suspended from the ceiling. I always remember that. I thought that was really neat. I loved animals as a kid. I still love animals today. But that was a museum when I was really young, before I could understand what was going on at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which has paintings and sculptures instead of lots of very large stuffed animals and things like that. I was a big fan of the Museum of Natural History. And this statue of Roosevelt, he is on horseback, and there is a Native American and an African American on both sides of him. I do not really understand why this is now all of a sudden, although it goes back to 2017. They threw paint on the statue. I mean, the left has been agitating about this for a while. But see, now they're proposing this as just it's just this sculpture. It's just this. They're tearing down Churchill. They're tearing down Woodrow Wilson, who's actually a bad guy and a racist, but he's a Democrat. But they're tearing down Junipero Serra, Juan de Oñate. They're tearing down Voltaire. They're tearing, go to Ulysses Grant, George Washington, for heaven's sakes. They're tearing down all these statues. But this time, the people in power, it's not about pulling the statue down. It's making the decision to remove it. And Democrats, of course, remember, the Democrats are the political party that waits to exploit for power and for their own political ends what the mob and the anarchists and the BLM movement are doing out there in the streets, right? Their militant wing is terrifying people, destroying things, breaking the law, and the Democrats stand back and say, yes, well, just do what we say and perhaps some of this will stop. We're here to negotiate. We're the civilized ones in this conversation. We, the Democrat Party, we're not Antifa. Yeah? Do they condemn it? Do they take action to stop it? No, of course not. They benefit from it. They like it. Let's be honest. The Democrats like their militant wing. They like the BLM movement. They like Antifa. They think all of this is fantastic. Otherwise, they've got a bunch of, in their leadership ranks, super old, out-of-touch, rich white people like Nancy Pelosi, right? Like Joe Biden. And they've got a bunch of young, up-and-coming leftists. This is the AOC and the squad, who most of the country does not agree with on most issues, and that's putting it mildly, and who are just ignorant of economics, of American history, of society, but they've been trained in the left-wing agitation and the rhetoric of the diversity and inclusion movement, which isn't about inclusion if you think that some of this stuff is a bad idea, if you think that watering down standards is wrong, if you think that we should have objective metrics irrespective of race for admission into universities or for hiring. No, none of that is acceptable. It's inclusive except for ideas that they deem to be excluded from the conversation. And that's, as we know, the continuing reality of this. But let's just go back to this Teddy Roosevelt statue for a second, because this is, dare I say, symbolic of how they're going to approach everything from here on out. They're saying it's just this statue. But if you look at what the New York Times write-up of this ruckus is all about, it's much more than just this statue. But they want to see if they can get one time a cancellation of this. Well, then what else can they get canceled about Teddy Roosevelt? What president is safe from their cancellation efforts? It's fascinating, but give it time. Even Barack Obama in time will come under stronger criticism if the left, if the logic of the left continues to be applied in this way for Obama's opposition to gay marriage as a president, not once but twice running for office. Now, they'll always make excuses for Obama, don't get me wrong, but when you look at where we are now, anybody who is not woke by today's standards from history, including on the left, including Democrats, can be attacked. No one is safe from it, and that's how the mob likes it. No level of heroism, no reform of one's ideas or ideology throughout one's life. If you were born to a family, let's say, that was supportive of slavery and then spent your life as an adult freeing slaves and as an abolitionist, no, sorry. Still unacceptable even to celebrate that portion that was clearly righteous and moral of one's life. Can you celebrate someone's acts, someone's works for what they were without having to take on the defense of the individual as a whole? These are real questions that we have to ask now. They tell you that this is all about just the statue of Teddy Roosevelt. And just give it time. They're going to have to, Japanese Americans interned by FDR, they're going to have to rename the FDR Drive here in New York. You have to rename a whole bunch of things that are currently named for that guy. The other Roosevelt. Remember, the Roosevelt who didn't intern Japanese Americans is the one who's under the scrutiny of the left currently. But they're saying it's just a statue. That's a lie. They've already started to make noise about how Teddy Roosevelt. So if you want to say, oh, but just this depiction is bad, just this depiction is out of touch, that's not what they're going to claim. They'll say this today so that you bend the knee and say, fine, pull this statue. Just as we said, you know what, Confederate generals, those guys fought for the wrong side, and slavery is an evil, and we all know this. So, I knew a lot of people. I knew a lot of conservatives, especially from the North, who were saying, I kind of understand this. And I'm sympathetic to the impulse to fully confront the history of slavery and the Confederacy and the racism therein. I'm sympathetic to that, too. I'm not sympathetic to mobs lopping off the heads of statues that are public property. And I'm not sympathetic to people making demands based upon the implied threat of mob force, even if they are right on the merits of a historical argument, let's say. This should be done through a process. But here in New York, see, now they are doing it through a process. I know that's going to be the transition. Well, Buck, look at what they're doing. Why do you oppose this? Because they're not being honest about what's going to happen. They're not being honest about what's next. Oh, no, just this statue of Teddy Roosevelt is coming down. But they already say that Roosevelt, in his later life, was a eugenicist and a racist and certainly a colonialist. There's a lot of anger at Roosevelt for the expansion through the Spanish-American War, the expansion of U.S. territories and possessions. People look at the Caribbean, they look at the Philippines, and they say, well, hold on a second here. Teddy Roosevelt was an expansionist, a colonialist, so he's a bad guy too. Well, I just want to know, do we allow the left to just go straight up Taliban? You will recall it was years ago, perhaps it was, I think, 1996, maybe it was 99, I forget. It was the late 90s, when the Taliban, as part of its cleansing of society, of anything deemed not Islamic enough, destroyed the Buddhas of Bamiyan, which were thousands, these massive Buddhas, thousands of years old, considered a global heritage site. I mean, considered something that all archaeologists, and they were practically a wonder of the world. And the Taliban barbarians came along, and they didn't like this, and they felt that it was un-Islamic. And so instead of just saying, look, you cannot go check these out for historical reasons or religious reasons, they blew them up, mostly with RPGs. They fired RPGs at these statues to destroy them. And they did. I want to know how far we are from liberals effectively arguing that we need to use RPGs to take Teddy Roosevelt's face off of Mount Rushmore. I don't think it's far away. Maybe they won't use RPGs because they're scary, but they'll bring in demolition crews. They'll bring in construction crews. No more. But if you're going to take down Teddy Roosevelt, are you going to leave Washington? Think about this for a moment. Who gets to stay? What president are we allowed to celebrate? And what really ultimately is the purpose of this whole project? It's not to bring us together. It's not for reconciliation and national healing. This is all about division. This is about undermining fundamental historical figures that had an enormous impact on the country we live in today and our rights and our beliefs and that shared idea that is America, canceled, erased. Who are going to be the acceptable statues of the future? It is fascinating that this group seems to always leave anybody who is a communist alone. If you're a communist, if you're a Marxist, and a white Marxist even, no one has any problem with you on the left. The millions and millions of people murdered, the hundreds of millions of people enslaved by the communist system, stripped of all rights, stripped of all autonomy, all freedom, forced to work for the state at gunpoint, forced to have family turn on family, which liberals now are advocating for. Make no mistake about it. They want you to inform on relatives. They're telling young people to call out publicly their own loved ones. Anyone who supports a political ideology more than their own family is morally corrupted and lost. Family first, my friends, always. The left seeks to destroy the family. Why is that? Because there are two pillars of our society that act as a bulwark against the onrushing insanity of the left: religion and family. Belief in God, a relationship with God, and the understanding that we are all here just for a temporary period and it goes very quickly. And also that we have a family, that we have people that matter more to us than anyone else in the whole world, that matter more than any political ideology or political party or program of reform. Anyone who's willing to turn on their family because the woke mob says so is lost. And we have to understand that. I don't know if we can bring them back into the light of sanity and normalcy and being reasonable. I don't know. I don't know if it's possible. But the mass hysteria that we are seeing now is a function of massive forces that have come together: the COVID pandemic, Democrat hatred of Trump, and also the elites who are desperate to maintain their position, as we were increasingly aware in this country of the massive failure of those in the elite classes. They're also seeking to use this as a moment to build, to burnish their credibility with the masses after what we've seen as largely a sellout of the American people to international corporations, a sellout of the American people to non-citizens who are here illegally. You go down the list. What really is your allegiance to this country if the Democrats have their way? If they can violate laws with impunity, they can dictate to you what you can say, they can tell you to stay in your home. Are you really free? Do you think you're free in this country right now? I think we are going through a massive red pilling. And I will tell you right now, I used the term red pill on my show back in 2012 before I had ever heard of anyone use this before. I'm not saying I was the first, but I was a big fan of the Matrix, always had been. And I know now it's been co-opted by other people, but I said it before. Any of these other groups and any of these other people I see out there were using the term, and those who are original Saturday Squad know that. So hearkening back to what I said in 2012, now 8 years ago on this show, I do think that we are going through a massive red pilling. I just don't know if it's too late for those who see this for what it is to be able to rally and stop this movement from doing irreparable damage to the country.
If Joe Biden were to become president, an emboldened left will launch a full-scale assault on American life. You know that. They'll expel anyone who disagrees with them. Look what happens when you disagree. You use a term that's perfect and they're not happy with it. They call you a racist. They call you a horrible person. They want to crush religious liberty. They don't want religion. Silence religious believers. Indoctrinate your children with hateful and vicious lies about our country. Subsidize late-term abortion and after-birth execution.
The president is right, so that's good. I mean, he knows what's going on here. He understands what the left is trying to accomplish. But right now, the momentum is against the Trump movement and the president. Look, that executive order on law enforcement last week was a bad idea, and I said it was, and we all know it now. It was feeding the crocodile, hoping it eats us last. Bad move. No more appeasement. No more concessions. The other side is not operating in good faith. Let's all remember that. But then there's also, how do we get the Trump message out there more? I'm doing what I can here every day, right? We got hundreds of thousands of people listening to this show and the podcast and the stream all across the country. I'm hoping they share it. I'm hoping you share this show with as many people as you can so they feel like our voice on the right is being heard, that our argument is the correct one, and here's how to make it. This is what I'm trying to accomplish with what I'm doing every day. But I also think the president has to go around the gatekeepers even more. Twitter is not enough. I'm seeing these days all these senators and congressmen have got their own podcasts, which I would like them to be focusing probably more on legislation than being podcast hosts. But, okay, the more the merrier, I suppose, in this business. Why doesn't Trump have a video podcast every day, or, a video clip he's putting out? Why doesn't Trump just start his own podcast, his own TV channel right now? I mean, if this is what's going to happen, Democrats, Republicans, they're all doing it. The president has to get out there and give people the message and the inspiration to fight for his side. And we can't rely just on these rallies, as we see the Democrats are trying to subvert the rallies, using TikTok, the social media platform, to take seats and tickets for seats that they're never going to actually use.